It started with the sound of a clipboard snapping shut. Sharp, final, and filled with arrogance. Karen Mitchell stood at the edge of my property, hands on her hips, the golden HOA badge gleaming like she was sheriff of the suburbs. The morning sun caught her sunglasses, reflecting a mirror image of me. A man holding a rolled-up blueprint and a dream, bigger than the rules she loved to quote. "You can't build anything here without my authorization," she said, her tone dripping with authority she didn't earn. "And that excavator in your yard? It's a violation." I looked past her, to the half-acre of rugged land I bought after years of saving, a blank canvas of dirt and promise. I'd spent every evening planning my cabin, sketching it down to the last nail. But now she was standing there like the gatekeeper of failure. "Karen," I said slowly, "this is my land. I'm following every code that matters." She smirked. "My codes are the ones that matter here." That was the moment the line was drawn. She turned, heels crunching the gravel, and strutted back to her pristine white SUV, her mobile throne. The tires spit dust as she drove off, leaving me in a cloud of frustration and disbelief. That night, I sat at my kitchen table staring at the permits. I did have legal, approved. But Karen didn't care about the law. She cared about power. Then came the letter, slipped under my door the next morning. Immediate stop work order. Non-compliance will result in fines and forced removal. My blood boiled. I could almost hear her smug laugh as I read it. The excavator sat outside my window, silent and patient, like a beast waiting to wake up. I went out at sunrise. The sky was orange, the air heavy with challenge. My hand hovered over the ignition key. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Karen's SUV idled at the corner, phone in hand, ready to document violations. She didn't know she was about to witness something she'd never forget. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, a thunderous, earth-shaking defiance. Karen's coffee cup dropped from her hand as the excavator's arm lifted high, cutting through the air like vengeance itself. If she wanted a show, she just got front row seats. The excavator's roar echoed through the neighborhood like a war cry. Birds scattered from the trees. Car alarms chirped in panic. And every curtain within 3 blocks shifted as curious eyes peeked out. Karen's face twisted from smug confidence to disbelief. Her jaw hung open, her phone trembling in her hand. She wasn't used to people disobeying her, especially not publicly. She stormed toward me, heels stabbing into the gravel with every furious step. "Turn that thing off right now!" she shrieked over the engine's growl. "You're violating—" "Not a single rule," I cut in, voice steady. "All permits are valid. You can check them yourself." She froze for half a second, thrown off balance, then sneered. "We'll see about that." The excavator's bucket dipped into the ground, scooping up a mound of earth with a satisfying crunch. The ground trembled, and I swear I saw her flinch. It wasn't just construction anymore, it was a declaration. From across the street, old Mr. Benson stepped out with his morning coffee, watching like it was the best show he'd seen in years. Finally, someone standing up to her, he muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. Karen's eyes darted toward him, then back to me. "You think you can just ignore the HOA?" I smiled. "Watch me." She fumbled for her phone, pointing it at me. "I'm recording this. You'll regret it." "Make sure you get my good side," I said, pulling the lever again. The excavator's arm swung around, lowering a massive pile of dirt right next to her car, close enough to splatter mud across her pristine paint. She gasped, stepping back in horror. You can't do that!" "Pretty sure I just did." By now, half the neighborhood was outside, cameras out, whispers spreading like wildfire. A couple of teens even started live streaming. Karen's authority was slipping, and she could feel it. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "This isn't over, Ethan. You'll be hearing from the board." I shut off the excavator, the engine quieting to a deep mechanical hum. "Good," I said, "because I'll be waiting." She turned and stormed off, furious and humiliated, while the neighbors started clapping, hesitant at first, then louder, bolder. That moment sealed it. I wasn't just fighting for my land anymore. I was fighting against the tyranny that had ruled this neighborhood for too long. And Karen? She wasn't done. The next morning she'd strike back, harder, dirtier, and far more dangerous. By sunrise, the neighborhood looked like a war zone waiting to happen. The excavator sat in the middle of my lot like a yellow beast at rest, silent but menacing. Every bolt shimmered with morning dew and anticipation. I barely finished my coffee when the first car pulled up, then another, then 3 more. A convoy of smug faces in pressed shirts and cheap authority badges. The HOA board, and of course, leading them like a general in a war she couldn't lose, was Karen. She climbed out of her SUV with a new fire in her step. Gone was the shaky, humiliated woman from yesterday. Today she had backup. And papers. Lots of papers. "Ethan Cole," she began, reading from her folder like she was in a courtroom. You are in direct violation of Community Code 8.3, 9.1, and none of those apply to me, I said, stepping closer. My land isn't under your HOA jurisdiction. We've been through this. A murmur rippled through her board members. One of them, a balding man with thick glasses, hesitated. Karen, maybe we should verify that before. She shot him a look that could melt steel. He thinks he's exempt, she said, forcing a laugh. But I've already contacted zoning. They'll shut him down. I folded my arms. Then let's wait for them, shall we? Karen's smile didn't reach her eyes. Oh, we will. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Neighbors gathered at the edges again. Phones raised like spectators at a public execution. But they weren't cheering for her this time. I could see doubt flicker in her eyes, just for a moment, before she turned to her board. Tape off his property, now. They froze. No one moved. Did I stutter? She hissed. That's when I fired up the excavator again. The sound ripped through the still morning air like a thunderclap. The board members stumbled back, hands over their ears. Dust swirled. Karen screamed over the noise. Turn that off! You're making this worse! That's the idea, I shouted back. The excavator's arms swung in slow, deliberate arcs, not touching a thing, but close enough to make her flinch. The ground vibrated beneath our feet. Karen's perfect composure cracked. You're insane. I smiled coldly. No, I'm just done being bullied. She stormed off again, but this time she wasn't retreating. She was regrouping. That night, I'd learned what real retaliation looked like, and this battle was about to turn from paperwork to pure chaos. It started with the sound of breaking glass. I woke up to the echo of shattering bottles and the distant growl of an engine. The clock read 2:37 a.m. outside. My yard lights flickered weakly, then went dark. Power cut. I threw on my boots and grabbed the flashlight. When I stepped out onto the porch, the air was thick with gasoline and something worse, the sour smell of petty revenge. The excavator loomed in the dark, but it wasn't alone. Someone had spray-painted illegal builder in red across the side of it. Tires slashed, windows cracked. My project, my pride, it had been vandalized. And there, at the end of the driveway, a taillight vanished into the night. I caught a glimpse of the license plate just before it disappeared. White SUV. Karen. I clenched my jaw so tight it hurt. This wasn't about the rules anymore. It was about humiliation. She wanted me gone, to make an example out of me. The next morning, she was already there, pretending innocence. Sunglasses, clipboard, fake concern. Oh, Ethan, she said, shaking her head dramatically. Such a shame. Maybe now you'll understand why this neighborhood isn't safe for construction projects. I took a step toward her, mud splashing under my boots. You did this. She gave a light laugh. Accusations without proof? Dangerous territory. I could feel the neighbors' eyes again. Some watching from windows, others pretending to water their lawns. She was performing, making me look like the aggressor. Fine, let her perform. I had a stage of my own. By noon, I had security cameras up, real ones this time, hidden, motion-triggered, and silent. The next time she came snooping around, I'd have her, and she would come back. People like Karen always did. They couldn't resist control. For the next few days, she kept up the act, calling inspectors, filing bogus complaints, even trying to tow my trailer off the property. But she didn't know I was recording every word. Every threat, every fake inspection. By day 5, I had hours of footage. That night, I sat in the glow of my monitor, replaying one clip over and over. Karen and a board member whispering beside my fence. Flashlight beams sweeping across the ground. She looked straight into the camera once, unaware it was there, and smiled. That was her mistake. Because tomorrow morning, I was done playing defense. By dawn, I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. Every bolt she loosened in my life, I was going to tighten tenfold. And the best part? I wouldn't have to break a single law. I'd just bend them the way she did. Karen thought she'd won the psychological war, but she underestimated one thing. I build for a living. I design things to withstand pressure. So I started with a plan. The next morning, I called a few friends from the construction yard. They didn't ask questions. They just showed up. Men who'd spent years operating heavy machinery. Men who didn't flinch at chaos. As they arrived, the street filled with the low rumble of diesel engines and metal clanks. The kind of sound that made the whole neighborhood peek through their blinds again. Karen stepped out of her house, robe fluttering, her coffee mug shaking in her hand. What is all this? She yelled across the road. I smiled. Just fixing what you broke. And with that, the excavator roared to life again. Louder, angrier, almost alive. My crew got to work leveling the land properly this time. Moving dirt, resetting the damaged parts. Every motion was clean, legal, but intimidatingly large scale. Karen's voice cracked as she screamed over the noise. You can't do this without permission. I lifted the permit papers high in the air. Already got it. She froze. Her eyes darted over the street where neighbors were filming again. She knew she couldn't stop me this time. Not without proof, not without power. And both had just slipped through her fingers. By mid-afternoon, my land looked different. Organized, sturdy, ready for a foundation. But that wasn't the end of the show. I wanted her to feel powerless. So I left the excavator parked right in front of her house, facing her driveway like a silent guardian. She came storming out again, fuming. Move it! Why? I said calmly. It's public property. Parked legally. You taught me how to read the fine print. Her cheeks flushed red. You're mocking me! Just learning from the best. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She stormed inside, slamming her door so hard the echo traveled across the street. That night, I watched her lights flicker on and off. She was pacing. Frustrated. Cornered. Exactly where I wanted her. But I wasn't done yet. Because tomorrow the foundation wouldn't be the only thing I'd pour. I had something much heavier in mind. Something that would shake the ground she stood on. The next morning dawned with a cold wind that tasted like change. I met my crew before sunrise. Hard hats catching the first light. We worked fast, the kind of precision you get from years with heavy equipment. We had a plan that would strike where it hurt. Karen's reputation. She'd ruled by rules and whispers. Neighbors obeyed out of fear, not respect. If that fear evaporated, so would her power. I intended to evaporate it in front of everyone. By 10, the street hummed. Word spread. Ethan is building again. Curtains opened. Phones lit up. The HOA board hovered at the edges, smiles thin and brittle. We started with a demonstration. The excavator cut a narrow trench, exposing earth like a curtain pulled back. My crew set stakes and string to mark a foundation. A small, undeniable rectangle that turned dirt into promise. Karen watched, furious. You can't just parade this, she spat. Watch us, I said. A neighbor named Lena, who'd stayed silent at meetings, walked to her porch and clapped. Others followed. The crowd grew, quiet at first, then louder as people realized they weren't alone. That afternoon I ran footage from my hidden cameras. The slashed tires, the paint on the excavator, Karen whispering with board members. I projected it onto my garage, timestamps and captions. The truth blown up for everyone to see. Her face went pale. She tried to shout over the footage, to call it fake. But the clips were real and the evidence stacked. The board's composure faltered. Then Mr. Benson, the man who'd once admired her hedges, walked up to the borrowed microphone. His voice trembled but carried. We deserve better than fear. We deserve fairness. The crowd cheered, steady, building into a wave. Karen stood frozen, clipboard useless in her hands. Her authority, once solid, now felt shaky. By dusk, the HOA called an emergency meeting, outside where everyone could attend. They rattled off rules and threats, but the momentum had shifted. When people saw the system protecting Karen was human and fragile, they stopped bending. The meeting ended with more questions than answers. Neighbors exchanged stories of petty fines and pressure. It was a small victory. Doubt had taken root. As the sun dipped low, I felt the change settle in my chest. The empire hadn't crumbled, but the cracks were wide. Karen paced inside her house, restless and pale, trying to reclaim control. And in the quiet, I realized the hardest part was ahead, keeping momentum without letting it turn into chaos. The next move would be crucial, and dangerous. I closed my toolbox, knowing the next day would test us. The calm didn't last 24 hours. By the next morning, the street felt wrong. Too quiet. The air heavy with that kind of silence that only happens before a storm. I stepped outside, coffee in hand, scanning the lot. My excavator gleamed under the early sun, still parked where I'd left it, until I noticed the yellow tape fluttering across its arm. Property seized, under investigation. I froze. Karen stood beside it, phone pressed to her ear, pretending to sound official. Yes, officer, he's still threatening me with that machine. She said loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear. Yes, I feared for my safety. It hit me. She'd called the police. Again, but this time, she'd gone further. She'd filed a false report. I approached slowly. What did you do, Karen? She turned, all smug composure. What I had to. You've become a danger to this community. I laughed bitterly. You slashed my tires, vandalized my machine, and now you're the victim? Her lips curled. Oh, I wouldn't say that so loud. Cameras, you know. Sure enough, she had her phone recording again, framing me as the aggressor. She'd learned to weaponize perception, and she was good at it. Within minutes, 2 police cruisers rolled in. Officer stepped out, calm but wary. Mr. Cole, we received a report of threats and illegal operation of equipment. Karen clasped her hands dramatically. He's been harassing me for weeks. I handed over my permits, the inspection approvals, and my ACE, a USB drive. Everything's on here, officer. Video proof. She vandalized my property and lied to the board. Karen's face paled for the briefest moment before she recovered. That's ridiculous. But the officer interrupted. Ma'am, we'll review the footage. For now, both of you, stay separated. They left after a tense half hour, leaving my property untouched but taped off. Karen had drawn blood in this round. Not with power, but with confusion. That night, my phone blew up. The footage from the garage projection had gone viral. Neighbors uploaded it. Local blogs shared it, and suddenly, HOA Karen wasn't just a local tyrant. She was a name people whispered online, and she knew. I saw her pacing in her window, blinds twitching. Her perfect world was cracking. But she wasn't going to back down. People like her never did. By morning, she'd have a new plan. Something desperate. Something reckless. And I'd be ready for it. Because the next time she tried to bury me, I'd be holding the shovel. The morning began with the metallic scent of adrenaline. I stepped outside to find the yard littered with small, deliberate damages, ropes frayed around stakes, warning signs bent, and oil slicks across the driveway. Someone had tampered with the equipment again, but this felt orchestrated, systematic, like a chess player setting traps. Karen stood at the curb, arms folded, watching with a predator's patience. Her face was pale but composed. She'd learned to hide the tremor. This ends now, she said through clenched teeth. My crew gathered, faces dark. This isn't random, Miguel said, kneeling beside a displaced hinge. They knew exactly where to hit. I didn't answer. Whoever did this wanted to escalate fear. Whoever did this wanted me to stop. Within an hour, the neighborhood split. Some posted warnings about unsafe construction. Others offered tools. The HOA held a private meeting at Karen's. She emerged with a forced smile and a stack of complaints. Her allies organized legal threats and concerns. I decided to stop reacting and control the narrative. We uploaded footage of the vandalism to a secured community page with timestamps. Neighbors shared it. The conversation shifted from, "Is Ethan a threat?" to "Who is attacking him?" That night, a crowd gathered on my driveway. Not to condemn me, but to guard. Lena, Mr. Benson, and 3 others stood by the excavator like marshals. People took shifts watching. We set up floodlights, motion sensors, and I posted a reward for information. Karen watched from her porch, neck tight. Her sabotage had backfired. Instead of isolating me, it had united some neighbors against her. The war changed tone. No longer permits and complaints. It had become covert attacks in the dead of night. Intimidation dressed as civic duty. I knew she could be ruthless, but I doubted she'd risk real harm. On the 7th night, a volunteer caught movement on camera. A shadow moving behind the hedge toward the excavator. We converged silently, flashlights cutting through dark. The figure stumbled into the light and froze. It was Karen's board member. He dropped a coil of wire and lifted his hands. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "She made us do it." The revelation was a grenade. It didn't absolve him, but it revealed a chain of command. Karen had pushed others into the mud. Now the neighborhood would decide whether to pull them out or bury them with the truth. Rumors spread by morning. Local blogs had sniffed the story, and people texted offers of support. I felt the pressure shift. Not just local gossip, but a public spotlight. We prepared for the next day, a neighborhood meeting, evidence laid bare, and a choice about Karen's fate. By the next morning, the neighborhood wasn't a community anymore. It was a stage. Word of the confession had spread like gasoline on dry ground. Every resident wanted to see what would happen next. Cars lined the streets, cameras flashed from porches, and whispers rippled through the crowd. The HOA had called for an emergency town meeting. Translation: Karen's desperate attempt to regain control. The meeting was set up right in front of her house. Folding chairs, microphones, even a banner that read, "Community integrity matters." The irony almost made me laugh. I stood off to the side, hands in my jacket pockets, camera crew ready. The footage from my security system was queued up on a portable projector. Evidence she couldn't spin away this time. Karen emerged from her doorway dressed like she was running for office. Neat blazer, manicured smile, but her eyes betrayed her. They darted across the crowd, searching for loyalty that wasn't there anymore. She tapped the mic. "Good morning, neighbors. There's been some confusion about recent events." Confusion? That word drew a few scoffs from the crowd. She pressed on. "We've had incidents of vandalism, unauthorized construction, and online harassment. But I assure you, I've always acted in the best interest of this community." That's when I stepped forward. "Then you won't mind if we clear up the confusion, right?" A murmur spread. I plugged in the USB and hit play. The projector hummed to life. The footage from Chapter 8 lighting up. Karen's own house. It showed her board member sneaking across my property. Then, clear as day, Karen's voice whispered from the shadows. "Cut the lines. Make it look like an accident." The crowd gasped. Someone shouted, "You endangered people!" Karen's face drained of color. That's edited," she stammered. "He's fabricating this." But the timestamps, the location data, all there, undeniable. Even her loyal board members stepped back, ashamed. One muttered, "Karen, we can't protect you from this." Her voice cracked. "You're all being manipulated. He's turning you against me." I met her eyes. "No, Karen, you did that yourself." The crowd erupted. Not angry, relieved. People finally spoke out. Stories poured out. Fines, intimidation, false citations. Years of silence broke in one afternoon. Karen's clipboard slipped from her hand, hitting the pavement with a hollow clack. Her empire didn't fall in flames. It fell in silence, a collective turning away. She stumbled back into her house as chants rose. No more HOA rule. But even as she disappeared behind her door, I saw it. The look in her eyes. Not defeat, not yet. Something darker was brewing. And it was aimed squarely at me. The night after the showdown, the neighborhood felt unsettled, quiet, but not peaceful. The kind of silence that follows an explosion before the dust fully settles. Karen's house stayed dark, curtains drawn, no car in the driveway. Some said she'd left town. Others swore they'd seen her lights flicker on and off at midnight. I didn't care which rumor was true. I knew she wasn't done. People like Karen never vanished quietly. They came back sharper. Still, for the first time in months, I let myself breathe. The excavator gleamed under the moonlight like a sentinel, scarred, battered, but undefeated. Around 3 a.m., the lights in my living room flickered, then went out. At first, I thought it was a grid failure, but when I stepped outside, I saw it, a shadow darting between my equipment. Then another, the faint clink of metal on metal. I grabbed my flashlight and moved closer, slow, silent. The beam caught movement. Someone crouched near the excavator's fuel tank. "Hey!" I shouted. The figure bolted. I sprinted, heart hammering, cutting across the dirt. They tripped near the fence, and when I caught up, the flashlight revealed her. Karen, covered in mud, hair wild, clutching a wrench like a weapon. "What are you doing?" I demanded. Her eyes were wide, unhinged. "You ruined everything. They all turned on me because of you. You did that yourself." She swung the wrench, wild, desperate. It missed my head by inches, clanging off a metal pole. I grabbed her arm. "You're insane, Karen. You could have killed someone." Her voice cracked. "I built this neighborhood. I kept it perfect. And you—" She yanked free, screaming, "You don't get to destroy it." Before I could stop her, she stumbled toward the excavator, slipped, and slammed her hand against the ignition. The engine roared to life, gears grinding, arm twitching. "Karen, step back!" I shouted, lunging forward. She didn't listen. She tried to climb up the cab, but her foot slipped on the mud, and she fell hard, hitting the ground. Neighbors' lights flicked on. Doors opened. Voices called out. I turned off the machine and knelt beside her. She was conscious, shaking, glaring up at me through tears and dirt. "Are you proud of yourself?" she whispered. "You've turned everyone against me." I sighed. "No, Karen, you did that the day you forgot what community meant." She didn't answer, just stared, broken but defiant. As the flashing lights of an ambulance painted the night, I realized this wasn't over. She'd lost control of her empire, but she still had something more dangerous left. A need for revenge. The morning after the accident, the street was lined with silence and flashing tape. The paramedics had checked her, bandaged a bruised arm, and driven off. The police had asked a few questions, scribbled notes, and left me standing in the chill dawn with a hollow ache in my stomach. By noon, Karen was gone. Her SUV vanished from the driveway. The curtains that once twitched at every neighborly sin hung still. For the first time in years, her house looked empty, windows dark, mailbox overflowing. Some said she'd been taken to stay with family. Others whispered about legal trouble. I didn't believe either. Karen didn't retreat. She regrouped. Still, life resumed in uneasy fragments. The HOA, without its queen, started unraveling. Meetings were canceled. People stopped paying fines. The rules, once sacred, turned into dusty pamphlets no one respected. For the first time, kids rode bikes down the street without worrying about tire marks on curbs. Someone even painted their fence a shade of blue that wasn't on Karen's approved color. List. It felt like freedom. Fragile. Unfamiliar but real. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. At night, I'd see motion lights flicker by the tree line. Tools went missing. Footprints appeared near the shed. My crew swore they saw a car parked at the end of the road with its lights off. Same model. Same license plate pattern. Karen. Then, one morning, I found an envelope taped to my front gate. No stamp, no name. Just my name written in perfect, neat handwriting. Hers. Inside was a single photograph. Me standing by the excavator at night. The angle was close. Too close. Someone had taken it from my backyard. No note, no message, just the image. I stared at it until my hands started to shake. This wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. She wasn't gone. She was out there, waiting, watching. That night, I installed more cameras, double-checked the locks, and slept with the sound of diesel in my dreams. But fear wasn't what kept me awake. It was curiosity. What was her next move? By the end of the week, I found out. At dawn, my excavator's alarm blared. Motion detected. I ran outside barefoot, heart pounding, and froze. Someone had dumped hundreds of flyers across my yard. Each one read the same thing in bold black letters. Illegal builder, under investigation. And at the bottom, in tiny handwriting, one sentence chilled my blood. You should have stayed quiet. For 3 days, I barely slept. Every shadow looked like her silhouette. Every creak in the walls sounded like a footstep. But fear had turned into fuel now, and I wasn't about to let Karen control me from the dark. Those flyers weren't random. Someone had printed them in bulk. I followed the trail the only way I knew how, tracking where the ink came from. My buddy Marcus, who ran a small printing shop downtown, helped me check recent orders. When he pulled up the logs, he frowned. We had a woman order 500 flyers under the name K. Mitchell Consulting. Paid cash. Bingo. Marcus hesitated. She gave a return address, too. But it's weird. It's a storage yard out on Route 19. A storage yard, quiet, empty, and just far enough from town that nobody would notice someone coming and going. I drove there that night. The wind howled across the open lots, rows of metal units stretching into the dark. My headlights skimmed over Unit 47, the only one with fresh tire tracks and a faint glow leaking from the cracks. I killed the engine and moved quietly, the crunch of gravel loud in the silence. When I reached the door, I heard it, a soft humming, a generator. I lifted the latch slowly, peering inside, and froze. It wasn't a storage unit. It was a command center. Walls covered in photos of me, my crew, my house, even aerial shots of my property. Strings connected faces, names, dates. She'd built a web, her own investigation board. At the center was a picture of me next to the excavator, circled in red, with one word written underneath. Destroyer. For a moment, my chest tightened. This wasn't just obsession. It was delusion. Then I heard a noise behind me, the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel. I turned. Karen stood under the pale light of the yard lamp, her face half-shadowed, eyes burning with a manic calm. You shouldn't have come here, Ethan, she said softly. This isn't about rules anymore. Then what is it? I asked. Her voice dropped to a whisper. It's about control. You took mine. Now I'm taking yours. She stepped closer, and I saw something glint in her hand. A small metal device, wired and blinking red. My heart stopped. Karen, I said carefully, put it down. Her smile widened. You fired up the excavator in front of me, remember? I'm just returning the favor. Then she dropped the device and ran. A high-pitched beep echoed through the dark. I dove for cover, and the night erupted. The explosion ripped through the night like thunder tearing the sky in half. The blast threw me into the dirt, gravel biting into my palms. My ears rang, high, sharp, and endless. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the wind and my heartbeat hammering against my ribs. When I finally looked up, Unit 47 was on fire. Flames climbed the corrugated walls, painting the night orange. The heat stung my face. Inside, the generator screamed before sputtering out. Sparks rained down like angry stars. Karen's car was gone. Only her tire tracks curved into the dark road like a signature. I stumbled to my feet and ran closer, trying to pull open the door, but the metal was too hot to touch. A small explosion inside, maybe the generator tank, sent me stumbling back again. Then I saw it. Among the flames, a fragment of the wall still stood. The photo board. My face burning away in the fire, the red circle shrinking into ash. I called 911, choking on smoke as I watched months of her obsession go up in flames. When the fire trucks finally arrived, I stayed silent. What could I even say? That the HOA president had built a bunker shrine to ruin me? That she'd planted a device to destroy it herself? They'd think I was mad. By dawn, the fire was out. The firefighters found scorched paper, melted metal, nothing else. But I noticed one thing they didn't. The charred remains of a second blinking device, deeper in the debris. She'd planted two. One to burn evidence, one to scare me. I drove home in silence. The neighborhood was still asleep. My excavator sat motionless, the first rays of morning reflecting off its steel arm. For once, it didn't look like a tool. It looked like a weapon. I knew then that Karen wasn't finished. The explosion wasn't her endgame. It was her message. That afternoon, police cars circled the block. They questioned neighbors, asked if anyone had seen Karen. Nobody had. She'd disappeared completely. No digital footprint, no phone pings, nothing. But I knew she was alive, because late that night, I got another envelope. Inside was a photo of me standing outside the burning storage unit, taken from the woods, and beneath it, one sentence written in perfect ink: "You should have stayed out of my way." I crumpled the photo in my hand. The war had just gone from public to personal, and next time, I wasn't waiting for her to strike first. The next morning, I was done hiding. The fire had burned more than Karen's hideout. It had burned away my hesitation. I knew what she was capable of now, and I wasn't waiting for her next move. I started with what was left of the storage yard. The police had sealed it off, but I still had connections in the construction crew that helped clean up. When they weren't looking, I slipped into the debris. The air still smelled of smoke and melted plastic. Under a slab of twisted metal, I found a folder that had somehow survived the flames, scorched at the edges, but the papers inside mostly intact. It was full of maps, my property lines, street layouts, power routes, and one detailed blueprint of my construction site, marked with bright red X's. Each X had a note beside it: water main, fuel line, load-bearing trench, and in the corner, written in bold letters, collapse phase. Karen wasn't trying to ruin my reputation anymore. She was planning to destroy my entire project. My project wasn't just a few buildings. It was a full development: homes, drainage systems, power grids. One mistake in the wrong trench, and the ground itself could cave in. I drove straight to the site. My crew was already at work, heavy machinery moving earth like clockwork. I waved Marcus over and showed him the blueprints. His face drained of color. "She knew everything," he whispered. "How'd she get this?" I didn't answer. Because I already knew. She'd been watching for months. We spent the next few hours checking every section of the site. Nothing at first, until we reached the main trench near the retaining wall. One of the excavator operators called out, "Hey, boss, you might want to see this." I climbed down. There, hidden under a tarp and layers of soil, was a line of small black cylinders wired together. Crude, but unmistakable. Explosives. My blood ran cold. Karen had set a trap beneath my own foundation. Marcus backed away slowly. "Man, if that went off, it would have taken half the site with it," I finished. I grabbed my phone and called the police, but before I could speak, a new message appeared on the screen. An unknown number. "You found my surprise," it read. Then another line appeared seconds later. "Now let's see if you can stop the rest." I froze. She was watching live. Somewhere out there, Karen was still pulling the strings, and the next explosion was already counting down. The wind howled through the half-finished construction site as I stared at the phone screen. That message burning in my mind. "Now let's see if you can stop the rest." Karen wasn't bluffing. If she'd wired one trench, she could have wired them all. "Marcus!" I shouted. "Shut down everything! Get the crew out, now!" Within minutes, bulldozers ground to a halt, engines cutting through the eerie silence. Workers scrambled off-site, confusion and fear written all over their faces. Dust clouds rose in the chaos. I ran toward the nearest trench, heart hammering. Every second felt like the click of a clock counting down to disaster. Marcus followed close behind, sweat streaking down his face. "You think she planted more?" "I know she did," I said. "She planned this like a demolition." We checked the second trench, clear. Then the third, wires, half buried under gravel, running toward the main fuel storage tank. My stomach turned to ice. "Call the bomb squad!" I yelled. "Now!" Marcus sprinted for his truck, fumbling with his phone. I stayed by the wires, trying not to breathe too loud, afraid any vibration could trigger something. Minutes later, sirens wailed in the distance, the sound of salvation, or maybe the sound of too late. I traced the wire carefully back to a small control box buried near a pile of cinder blocks. It was rigged with a phone trigger. One signal, one call, and the whole site could go up. Karen had turned my dream project into a live bomb. Then my phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. "Don't touch it, Ethan. You'll only make it worse." I froze, staring around. The site was empty, except for the wind and the whisper of shifting metal. But I knew she could see me. Cameras. She must have planted them around the property. I looked up at the crane towering over me, and there it was, a small blinking light near the operator's cabin. She was watching from everywhere. "Marcus!" I shouted. "Tell them to cut the power grid. She's got eyes all over the site." He relayed the order. One by one, the hum of generators faded. The lights dimmed, until only the red sunset bled across the dirt and machines. Then my phone buzzed once more. "You can't build a future on stolen land, Ethan. This is justice." Before I could reply, a deafening crack echoed from the far end of the site. The ground trembled. A plume of smoke and dust erupted into the air. One of the trenches had gone off. Karen had just made her first move. The blast hit like a thunderclap, shaking the air and rattling the steel frames around us. Dirt and debris rained from above as the earth groaned, splitting near the first trench. My instincts kicked in before the fear could. I bolted toward the smoke. "Marcus!" I shouted through the dust. "Get everyone back! No one comes near until we know what's live!" The smoke burned my throat as I stumbled through the half-collapsed path. The first explosion had blown a crater into the ground, exposing broken pipes and twisted metal. The pressure from the blast had destabilized the neighboring trenches. If even one more went off, it'd trigger a domino effect. Karen hadn't just planted bombs. She'd built a sequence. I followed the lines of shattered cable that snaked along the soil. Each wire connected to another trigger buried deeper in the trench. She'd built it like an engineer, clean, precise, merciless. Then I saw it. A secondary detonator box, half buried but still blinking red. The screen displayed a timer, 0245. 2 minutes and 45 seconds. I dropped to my knees, yanking open the casing. A mess of wires, red, blue, yellow. Every instinct told me to back off, but there wasn't time to wait for the bomb squad. Marcus came running, coughing through the haze. "Man, what the hell is this?" "Timer's live," I said. "She's rigged it to cascade through the trenches." Marcus's face went pale. "You can't disarm that, Ethan." I met his eyes. "I built half this system myself. I know where her power routes end. I can kill the circuit before it hits the next trench." He hesitated, then nodded once and sprinted for the main switch box. The timer dropped, 0130. Sweat poured down my face as I traced the wiring. The detonator fed from a remote signal line buried under the gravel. If I could cut that feed, I grabbed a wrench from my belt and slammed it down, tearing the cover loose. The screen flickered. "Zor 40 said." Marcus's voice crackled over the radio. "Main grid offline in 3, 2, 1. The site went dark. The hum of machinery died. Surveyor 2. The red light blinked faster, then froze. Sodomoro. Silence. Then, nothing. No blast, no tremor. Just the soft hiss of settling dust. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like forever. "We stopped it." Marcus ran back, his eyes wide with disbelief. "How did you—" Before he could finish, my phone buzzed again. A video message. Karen's face appeared, smirking in the flickering light. "You really thought I'd only rigged the trenches?" she whispered. "You forgot about what's under your house." And then the feed cut out. I didn't even hang up the radio. I just ran. The engine roared as I tore down the highway. The dust of the explosion still clinging to my jacket. My mind raced faster than the wheels. Karen had been steps ahead the whole time. If she'd planted something under my house, it meant she'd been there. Inside. Close enough to know every inch of my life. The moment I pulled into my driveway, I saw it. The front door cracked open, swaying gently in the wind. I drew in a breath and stepped out. The air was too still. Even the birds were silent. Inside, the house was cold. Every light was off. The faint smell of gasoline lingered in the air. I flicked on my flashlight and moved slowly, room to room. Nothing. Until I reached the living room. The rug was gone. The floorboards had been pried up. In the middle of the room sat a small black case, wires coiled around it like a nest. My stomach dropped. A note was taped to the top. "Every empire falls from within." I didn't touch it. I backed away, pulling my phone from my pocket and dialing Marcus. "She's been here," I whispered. "There's something under the floor." Static. Then faintly through the phone, a voice that wasn't his. "Karen, you can't rebuild what you never deserved, Ethan." I spun around, the beam of my flashlight slicing through the shadows. The back door was open now, swinging slowly. She'd been here recently. Maybe she still was. I crept toward the hallway, heart pounding. The floorboards creaked with every step. Then I saw it. A glint of reflection in the kitchen window. Movement. "Karen!" I shouted. "It's over! The cops are on their way!" Her voice drifted through the darkness. Calm. Cold. "You still don't get it, do you? This was never about the HOA or your machines. It's about control. You took mine, so now I'm taking everything." Then the smell of gasoline hit me again. Stronger this time. I glanced down and saw it. A thin stream of liquid snaking toward the open case. She wasn't planning a detonation. She was planning to burn it all. I bolted for the door, but before I could reach it, the lights flickered, and her voice came again, this time from a speaker somewhere in the house. "Run if you want. It won't matter. The ground beneath you's already set." A deep rumble shook the floorboards. Dust rained from the ceiling. And beneath the house something ticked. The ticking was faint but steady, mechanical, deliberate, deadly. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't leave. If Karen had wired something under my home, it could take out half the block. I grabbed the crowbar from behind the door and dropped to my knees. Near the open floorboards, the ticking grew louder the closer I got, echoing through the hollow crawl space beneath the house. The flashlight beam cut through the dark, revealing the narrow access hatch. I pried it open and dropped down, dirt coating my hands and boots. The air was damp, laced with gasoline and metal. And then I saw her. Karen. She was crouched near a cluster of pipes, her face illuminated by the blinking red light of a small detonator. Her once perfect hair was matted, her clothes streaked with soot. But her eyes, those same piercing, controlled eyes, burned with purpose. "You just don't quit," I said quietly. She didn't even flinch. "Neither did you. What do you want, Karen?" Her lips curved into a bitter smile. "You think this is about property lines and permits? You stole more than land, Ethan. You stole attention. You took the neighborhood, the headlines, the respect that was mine. I built order here. You built chaos." I took a slow step forward, hands raised. "You don't have to do this." "Oh, I already have." Her thumb hovered over the trigger. "One press and everything you've built, every lie, every wall, every shovel of dirt, disappears." The timer on the device flashed 0:59. I lunged. We crashed into the dirt, struggling in the tight space. The detonator flew from her hand, landing between us. She clawed at my arms, screaming, "You ruined everything!" The timer hit 00:30. I wrestled for control, pushing her back as the red light blinked faster. My hand shot out. I grabbed the device and slammed it against the concrete wall. The casing cracked. Sparks flew. Karen screamed, diving toward me, but I twisted aside and ripped the battery pack loose. The light flickered once, twice, then died. Silence. Both of us froze, breathing hard, staring at the dark. Then, a low groan. The structure above us shuddered. The foundation had cracked from the struggle. "Karen, get out!" I shouted, but she just looked up at the ceiling, expression blank, almost serene. It was never supposed to end like this. The beam above us splintered. I grabbed her arm and pulled, but the ground gave way. The house collapsed with a roar of splintering wood and falling earth. Then darkness. Silence, heavy, crushing silence. Then came the ringing, that dull, endless hum that fills your skull. When you've survived something you shouldn't have. My head throbbed. Dust hung in the air like fog. Somewhere above, the house that once stood proud was now nothing but wreckage and ruin. I tried to move. Pain shot through my shoulder. Dislocated, maybe worse. But I was alive. I turned my head, coughing through the haze. "Karen!" No answer. Just the creak of shifting wood and the slow hiss of settling debris. I crawled forward, dragging myself through broken boards and cracked pipes until I saw her, half buried under a beam, motionless. For a second I just stared. After everything she'd done, everything she'd destroyed, I expected to feel anger, relief, something. But all I felt was exhaustion. I pushed the beam aside, my arm trembling, and checked her pulse. Faint, but there. Her eyelids fluttered open. Those sharp blue eyes dull but still defiant. "You should have let it fall," she whispered. "You almost killed half the neighborhood," I said, voice shaking. "You think that's justice?" Her lips curved into a weak, twisted smile. "It wasn't about justice. It was about proving you're no better than me." I froze. Then she coughed, a wet, hollow sound, and pointed toward the wreckage beside her. "You didn't stop it. Not all of it." My stomach turned. I followed her gaze and saw a faint blinking light under the rubble. Another detonator, a backup. The timer glowed faintly, 0:45. I lunged toward it, ignoring the pain, clawing through the debris. My fingers brushed the casing, metal, bent, cracked. Karen laughed weakly behind me. "You'll never make it. Watch me." I tore the wires free, sparks flying. The timer dropped to 0:10. I ripped the entire battery cell out. The timer froze at 0:02. Silence again. I slumped to the ground, gasping for air. Karen stared at me, blood on her lips, her expression unreadable. "You always had to win," she whispered. I looked at her, not with hate, but with something close to pity. "No, Karen, I just wanted peace." Her eyes fluttered shut. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then, faintly, I heard sirens in the distance, growing louder, closer. I lay back on the dirt as red and blue lights flickered through the gaps in the debris. The war was finally ending. But as they pulled me out, one thought stayed burned in my mind. Karen's words. "You didn't stop it all." And for the first time that night, I wasn't sure she was wrong. 3 days later, I stood in what used to be my yard, now a field of ash, twisted beams and silence. The fire crews had come and gone, the investigators too. They ruled it an accidental structural collapse, but I knew the truth buried under those words. Karen Mitchell, the woman who'd waged war over lawns, fences, and rules, had nearly brought down everything I'd ever built. I stared at the charred remains of the foundation. Somewhere beneath that rubble, they'd found her body. The official report said she'd died instantly. But as I watched the excavator claw through the wreckage, I wasn't sure if that was justice or irony. Marcus walked up beside me, his arm in a sling. "You're lucky to be standing," he said quietly. "Yeah," I muttered. "Lucky." The cleanup crew kept digging. Every crash of metal against concrete made my stomach twist. I couldn't stop replaying her last words. "You didn't stop it all." That night, I couldn't sleep. The wind outside howled through the broken beams, whispering like her voice. Around 2 a.m., I went back out to the site with a flashlight. I needed to know. The ground was uneven, cracked where the foundation had given way. As I stepped over the debris, the beam of my light caught something glinting under a slab of concrete. A metal case, small and sealed tight. My chest tightened. I pried it open carefully. Inside were blueprints, new ones. Not for my house, not for the neighborhood, for something bigger. A community plan, labeled in her handwriting. The Mitchell Project, Phase 2. And below it, a single note. "Even in ashes, order rises again." I felt the chill crawl up my spine. This wasn't just a vendetta. It had been a legacy. She'd planned for everything, even her own downfall. Footsteps crunched behind me. Marcus had followed, flashlight in hand. "What is that?" I showed him the note. He frowned. "You think someone else is involved?" I didn't answer, because as I turned the paper over, I saw a faint digital chip embedded in the corner. A tracker, still blinking green. Someone was still receiving her signal. I looked out across the empty street. A black SUV sat at the far end of the block, engine running, headlights off. The driver's silhouette didn't move. Then, just as I lifted the flashlight toward it, the SUV rolled away, disappearing into the night. I stood there in the dust and silence, realizing the war wasn't truly over. Karen might have fallen, but her order was still alive.